Hi there, my name is Will, and today I'm going to walk you through a few different Docker frequently asked questions to hopefully get you set up with Kestra. Now, in module number 1, you set up a Postgres database and pgadmin using the same Docker Compose. Now, this is very useful because it meant that you had a database ready to go, and you also had pgadmin so you could view that database. Now, there's a few problems with this. First of all, the port number for pgadmin is the same as Kestra, so we see a clash here. And secondly, in module 2, I create my own database for Kestra, which has confused a few people, but the main issue it's caused is on some operating systems, such as Linux, you're unable to access it where it's outside of the same Docker Compose file, whereas on macOS, it works fine using host.docker.internal. I'm going to walk you through how you can combine that into one Docker Compose and be able to then access all the appropriate things. Now for Kestra, we have this Docker Compose file where we've got a Postgres database specifically for Kestra. This is where Kestra is going to store all of its data, and it has its own volume as well, so bear that in mind. And then scrolling down, we also have the Kestra container. Now this one here, pretty self-explanatory. This is going to run Kestra for us, and it's got all the configuration associated with that. Now you'll notice here that Kestra uses 8080 and 8081, so we need to make sure that those ports are kept open so that we can access Kestra. So we should change pgadmin to something like 8085. The other thing to note is the Postgres container is not exposed. There's no port on here. So we can keep using the same 5432 port for Postgres without running into any issues. Now I also had in the Git repository in the Postgres directory a separate Docker Compose for running the Postgres database for the exercises. And here it's very similar to the previous one that you were using. I've got my container name here, slightly different to the one that Kestra is using, and I have the ports exposed. So this makes it quite straightforward. Now if I was to combine this into the same Docker Compose, there's a few things I need to change. The first thing is this volume is exactly the same as the Kestra setup. So I need to change the name of this so that I don't get the Kestra database and my exercise database clashing with each other. The other thing is the actual name of this container is specified here, but in the YAML, they're both called Postgres. So I'll just need to rename that as well to make sure that we've got two unique names for the databases. We want to make sure that Kestra doesn't try and connect to this database by mistake, because it will not find the database it's after. It will find Postgres Zoomcamp rather than Kestra. Now, if you go to the README and scroll right to the bottom, you'll see under troubleshooting tips, we've now got a Docker Compose example here. So if you expand this, what you'll see here is we now have 3 volumes compared to Kestra's original 2, and we've got one called Zoomcamp data. Now, if I scroll down, the Postgres database for Kestra has remained the same. We can skip over this and leave this as is. Kestra has also remained the same, and we can go down and see that nothing has changed here. But if we go down, we've got the Postgres Zoomcamp database here now, and this is exactly the same as what we had in the separate Docker Compose, but we've renamed the volumes to make sure that they can keep their data separated from one another and there aren't any clashes. And the main reason for keeping these databases separate is so that Kestra, which will generate a bunch of different tables and stuff, it just makes it easier for us to see what we're actually doing to the database without getting in the mix of Kestra's stuff, as well as preventing any issues of us accidentally overwriting something in Kestra's database or deleting it. Now, the other thing I've added is depends on here to basically say, do not start this database until Kestra has started, to just make sure that Kestra is only going to try and communicate with its original database. And then underneath, we've got pgadmin2, this time running on port 8085. And as we can again see here, we've got it running on depends on, and we've got it saying once that Zoomcamp database is started, because otherwise we don't want to look at it. I've got a Linux instance set up here on Google Cloud. Now, if you're running Linux on your local machine, this should run the same. I'm using Ubuntu specifically. Now, on this, I have got a Docker Compose file, just like the one that we went through, which has all 4 services. So now, if I was to just do Docker Compose up on that file, what we'll see is it's going to pull all the images, and it's going to run that for me. And as we can see here, it's just got up and running. We can see Kestra is working, and we'll see the other services will start up too. We've got pgadmin, we've got the Postgres database for Kestra, and we'll see the Zoomcamp one start as well. I've just put the IP address of my Google Cloud VM and the port number to be able to access Kestra. Now, if you are using Google Cloud, I'd recommend checking our guide because you're going to need to add a few firewall rules to be able to access the UI. Now, if I go to flows here, I have got a Postgres one from one of the exercises. Now, if I scroll to the bottom of this workflow, we'll see that we've got plugin defaults that define what the username, password, and the URL are for the database. Now, because we're using Linux, we're going to get rid of the host.docker.internal. We use that on Mac to be able to communicate between containers, but because we've got everything in the same Docker Compose file now, what we can do instead is now put the name of the container. So because my container is called Postgres Zoomcamp, I put that in here instead of an IP address and instead of host.docker.internal. And then the port number, which we know was 5432, and then we've got the name of the database. So now when I run this, we'll be able to see that if I set this to run on the green data set, we'll see that it's going to be able to work and add that data to the database successfully because I've got it all correctly set up. And as you can see here, it has successfully been able to create data on as we expected. And I can actually go to the same IP address and access PG admin as well. So let me just add that. And here I've gone to PG admin. I can right click on servers, press register and click register server. And as you can see here, I've actually got my Zoomcamp database already set up. Now I can see my two tables here at the bottom, and I can actually just quickly view the first 100 rows of that green trip data and see that it is starting to work. And all of this is running on Ubuntu. So if you're running into issues with host.docker.internal, or maybe you're encountering connection refused where you can't connect to the database, try using this Docker Compose file where everything is combined, and this should work. This will make no difference to the original exercises, but the key difference is you're going to have to go into your workflows and rename the host.docker.internal here to the name of the database, which in my case, if we just switch back here, we can see that I had named it Postgres Zoomcamp. So just make sure whatever you named it is what you use. Now, one other question I got was, because I'm running it on Google Cloud, unless you're using Google Cloud's Postgres SQL database for being able to host the database separately and isolated from the VM, you're going to want to just keep the URL here, just like we did in Kestra, to the name of the container. So the container is just simply called Postgres. We could rename that to something else if we haven't started Kestra already. And you want to just put that in here. So you don't want to put the IP address of your VM or anything in here. We want to basically run everything on the Docker network internally. Hopefully that's answered your questions on how you can get Kestra set up with Docker. Let us know in the comments below if there's any outstanding questions, and we'll make another FAQ video to help you out.